front shocks are the same ordeal as this, and the only difference between the front and the rear shocks is these are taller. And then the front shocks, the bolt that goes in the top of them has a cam to it, so that adjusts your camber on your front wheels. So you might want to get an alignment after doing your shocks on your own, unless you know what you're doing. And if you're like me, you don't know what you're doing, and you're probably not going to get an alignment, just tow them till they're cambered all the way in like this. So I'm putting rear shocks in my mom's Subaru. I put new wheels on it, and I guess the wheels might weigh a little more. You could really tell that there was blown shocks in it after putting the wheels on it. So, I mean, just get a look at this. So we got our new shocks right here. Some things you might would want while you're doing this repair. Some large zip ties, a way to compress the springs, and some brake fluid here, because the brake lines clip through these shocks. You have to remove them somewhere. I remove them from the calipers, it's the easiest. So you want to start off by conforming into a smaller form, so you can crawl up in here and remove these 3 12mm nuts holding on the top hat. These 12mm nuts. Well, we don't own dogs, but as you can see in this car, there's clearly been a lot of dogs. There's dog hair stuffed all up in every crevice. It could be because it's here in the garage, or maybe from a previous owner with a bunch of dogs. So really, you gotta start off, you gotta flip that seat forward, and then you got a little plastic here. It just kind of rips off of there. Then you got your 3 12mm nuts. And this happens to be a convenient little tray for your nuts. So now that you've removed your 6 12mm nuts, you want to grab your jack, your most trusted jack. You're gonna jerk the car up into the air. That way you can take the wheels off the rear and the shocks can just come right out. There's small frame rail points under this car. Make sure you jerk up by those points and not the rocker panel. Otherwise you can tear up the body of the car. Now that you got your wheel off, there are 2 3/4 or 19mm nuts and bolts holding on the bottom of the shock right here. You're gonna wait to disassemble these because you have to take the brake line off first. As the brake line runs through the back of the shock right here, and then it goes into the caliper. So that is why you're going to need brake fluid, because you have to bleed the brakes to replace the shocks in these cars. Stick a flathead in there and tap her upwards. And just like that. brake clip is removed. Now set that aside and do not lose the brake clip, because it is going to hold your brake line in place. Now what you want to do is do not lose the washers. Remove this 12mm banjo bolt. It's gonna leak fluid everywhere, so just be swift about it and put the line back. Then grab you a nice towel or whatever and clean up your mess. Or you could be more prepared than I was and put on gloves and have a small catch down there for your fluids. Now that the brake line is removed, now it is time to remove these two nuts here. And if you do not have an impact gun with a pneumatic, just remember it's easier to bust the nut side free while holding this. There's more torque you're able to apply directly to where it's seized right there. So ta-da! Now you have a shock that is hard to wiggle out. So there we go. There's our blown out strut with the spring on it. There's our new struts. Instead of having this shoot directly off the top of it and across the shop, where I may never find it again, I'm going to compress the spring while it's still on here with this old spring compressor tool I got from AutoZone. See, now you got a little wiggle room here. This is 17mm. So if you don't have vice grip hands, you can use actual vice grips to hold that still while taking that nut off. As you can see, that shock is absolutely gone. Just look at this. That's insane. That is so blown out. I've never, if your shock's not labeled left or right, you'll be able to tell by where the brake line tab is. But these, they're in the part number. These FCS shocks have the left and right labeled in the part number right at the end. This one says right, so it goes on the passenger side. So you don't want to forget this boot. And as you can see, This is what a good shock does. There's a big difference there. Don't forget your little ring here. This is a rubber ring. This sits between the spring and the shock. It has little pull tabs on the bottom. You just pull them and then they'll snap into place. This one, I've cut the tabs off because they were rubbing the tires. So, dirty old spring back on it. So right after telling all you folks not to forget this boot, guess what I just did? I forgot the boot. It's okay, we're at a good spot to not forget the boot. I could just take that off and put the boot right in there. And just so you guys are aware, this is a directional. Right here, it's arrowed and pointed where it says out. To tell which direction is out, you think about which way this is pointing, because these bolts are pointed directly out. That bracket is, at least. So if you line up that with the bracket, best your eyeballs can get it, that's about as good as you're gonna get. It'll do the trick. There's a lot of sand in these shocks. Definitely not the best thing for them. What we're gonna do here, this is where the zip ties come in. We're gonna wrap zip ties around these coils that these clamps are holding together, and then we're gonna take the clamps off. These zip ties, make sure you get them as tight as you can, because once you take these clamps off, these zip ties are going to hold the weight. This will allow you to push the shock down just a little bit. That helps you install it when you're putting the bolts through. And then once it's installed, you can just clip these zip ties off and the spring will go back without hurting nobody. Not that, but what helped me just then was putting this bottom bolt in just a little bit and then looking through this window right here at the top 3 bolts and getting them to come through. Now I can just install everything back the way it was, just reverse it how it came apart. Now that those are torqued to spec, don't forget to put your brake line right back through the brake line bracket there off the shock. And it does go through there, you just have to turn it the right way. Now that the shock's all installed in here and the zip ties are holding it, all you got left to do here is cut these zip ties just like that. Make sure you watch your eyeballs and don't get any dust in your eyes, because some of them are tight. That one just didn't hold up to no pressure. There it is. Dropped the GoPro and the battery fell out. Alright, so there's a last zip tie right back there. I'm just going to cut that. And as soon as I can get to it. Bam. Now we're all done here. That new shock is installed. Now I'm just going to repeat the process on the other side, and I'll show you all the aftermath.
Now we go get the groceries. Now we can hook a trailer to it.
That'll tote a lot of kittens.
Mini Suburban forever.